Good morning, folks. Before we get into this week's show, I want to address the assassination attempt that happened this past Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, we are up against pure evil. They tried demeaning the man, and his support grew. They tried impeaching the man, and his support grew. They tried jailing the man, and his support grew. Up until this past weekend, everything the left has tried has only resulted in support for President Trump growing. That left only one possible solution for them in their minds. They have determined that they must kill him so that they can stay in power. It will be interesting to watch how this story unfolds. A question for you in the audience, though, folks. What is the one group of people that have been perpetuators of gun violence? The lefties that love that term, don't they? Gun violence. Just which lefty group has been at the center of that in our nation lately? Well, they have predominantly come from members of the leftist created alphabet mafia. If the shooter has a manifesto, watch how long they will delay releasing it to the public. Just which of the three types of people we discussed today would the shooter belong to? Keep that in mind. Now, and as has become the norm over the past couple of weeks, we're going to start the show with the political disclaimer first. The following content is approved by Larry Linton for TN12, candidate for the GOP nomination for Tennessee House of Representatives, District 12. Larry Linton, Treasurer. There's a lot to get into this week, and it all has to do with the campaign. There's a little twist, though, on how it ties into a national organization, but I won't give too much away in this introduction. I spent a lot of time out and about in the Seymour area talking to voters. It has been a sheer pleasure getting to know these hardworking folks that are absolutely fed up with the way our government, both the county commission and the General Assembly, the way they have been performing, or not really performing, their jobs for the past few years. Which sort of bodes well for me this election cycle. My volunteers have been out and about in the community sharing my cards and flyers, which has generated a lot of direct feedback to me with texts, phone calls, and emails. I really appreciate the amount of support I'm getting this go around. If I win this election, my volunteers will have played the biggest part in the victory. I had the carpal tunnel release surgery on my left hand earlier this week, and my first session of physical therapy was done this past Friday. The whole team over at that office, as well as the surgical team, they are all top-notch professionals. It is really wonderful having the full use of both of my hands without them going numb and tingling anymore. The really disappointing thing that has happened over the course of the last week is that the number of campaign signs of mine that have gone missing, it's increasing at an alarming rate. I'm up to 13 signs missing at this point. And like I said previously, the petty larceny is being conducted by people with small minds, which also ties into today's show quite nicely, as you will find out. So let's get on with this week's episode of the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast, where I will discuss the difference between a leader, a follower, and somebody that is just a puppet. So let's take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, and get on with the show. Welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. On this show, we will discuss the assaults on our liberty by the very institution we the people created to secure our liberty. We will also compare and contrast the actions of people in leadership positions to the servant leadership that is needed to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Additionally, we will break down the many lies that elected and unelected officials in government and media spin every day in order to secure for themselves positions of power and influence that are antithetical to the system of government our founding fathers created and passed down to us. Your host on this program is Larry Linton, a 30-year veteran of the United States Navy who also runs his own leadership consulting company. He is also a candidate for the Republican Party's nomination to represent Tennessee's House District 12, which includes Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Pittman Center, Wears Valley, Seymour, and parts of Sevierville, and most of Sevier County. So here is your host, Larry Linton. All right, getting back to the assassination attempt on Saturday, folks. What we witnessed in the aftermath of that was a true display of leadership. Shot, bloodied, and still imploring us all to fight on for our nation. President Trump exudes a quality that the left, as well as the establishment Republicans, cannot, and that is leadership. That is why they are hell bent. Excuse my language, but the commies are they always work me up. These commies are hell bent on getting rid of this man. They tried it politically, financially, through the court system, and they have been unsuccessful. They have used their dog whistles to whip up the weak minded people in one of the specially created subgroups to the point of violence and murder. They will leave no stone unturned and no play in the playbook unplayed to rid themselves of a true threat to their power. And that threat is Donald J. Trump and the America First movement. It is fortuitous that this week's topic is leadership. And in this week's show, we're going to dive into some questions that have a direct impact on my campaign for the GOP nomination for Tennessee House District 12, as well as tie into the assassination attempt. Let's start off by asking some questions. The first one is, what is a leader? Also, what makes a person a follower? And finally, what is a puppet? Not a literal puppet, but a person that is a puppet of leadership. As many of you may know, I've been at this leadership coaching bit for quite some time now. So just a little over 6 years now in the private sector as the CEO of my own company. And add to that more than 20 of the 30 years I spent in the Navy while in various senior enlisted leadership roles, both in the submarine force and in the surface Navy. In both the Navy and the private sector, I did and still do a lot of one-on-one leadership coaching. But that happens only after I observe the group dynamics of these teams that I do coach, especially in the oil and gas industry with its completely different objectives from those I encountered in the Navy. I did the same thing in the Navy with the individual unit or command chief petty officer messes that I engaged with. 3 of the things I looked for at the outset of my engagements were these. 1, who is leading or is the perceived leader of the group? 2, who are the followers or the first followers in this group? And 3, who are the puppets in this group? Some follow-on questions that I consider are this. Is the leader an ethical leader? Are they improving their individual team members, thereby improving the larger organization? What about the first followers? Because followers are just as important as the individual leaders in meeting the organization's overall objectives or the mission. The followers not only provide legitimacy to the leader, but can also serve as an ethical, moral, and principled sounding board for the leader to consult with in their decision-making and actions. When a team or organization are not doing the right things and are making those illegal, immoral, unethical, or unsafe decisions or engaging in actions of the same quality, it is primarily because the first followers are not doing their job. They are the ones unwilling to tell the emperor that he or she isn't wearing any clothes, so to speak. The leader and his or her first followers, they are key to the success or failure of whatever organization they are a part of. Think about the cliques or groups in school when you were growing up, or even the groups in the corporate or political world right now. It isn't just one person responsible for every action. The followers, the first followers, share in that responsibility. There are many examples we could list, like the many large banks that collapsed recently. The leaders of those banks' decisions and the followers, the first followers, acceptance of those decisions in each of those organizations allowed the circumstances to be put into place that led to the collapses. Another recent example is a tractor supply company, and apparently John Deere is currently on the same path that they are on, were on. In our constitutional republic, the first follower function is supposed to be fulfilled by a combination of we the people and the news media. They are supposed to work together in concert to ensure that elected officials, the people's elected representatives put into leadership positions, do not go down the path of making those same immoral, unethical, illegal, or unsafe decisions. We have all been witness to the downfall of one of those first followers over the past few decades, the news media, because they are not performing their function, which is necessary to keep quote unquote leaders from making those bad decisions. I believe I talked about that before. The reasons behind why leaders and their first followers make those unethical or immoral decisions. Those reasons can be captured in the acronym SPAM: sex, power, alcohol, or drugs, and money. In the political realm, it is usually power or money, because those two categories get them access to the other two. Just think about it, folks. Ever since the Watergate debacle of the Nixon administration, where the news media got their real taste for power because they proved to themselves to be more powerful than the government by leading to the downfall of a sitting president, they have decided that they, the news media, and only they, are to be the arbiters of what is wrong or right according to their desires and their beliefs. In the past decade, it's reached a frenzied stage with the Russian collusion and PP tape hoax, the quid pro quo hoax, the fine people on both sides hoax, and more recently with the insurrection hoax and the hush money hoax. The national news media has set themselves up at the top of the power pyramid in our constitutional republic. Their schemes are starting to be exposed, especially with their support of the lockdown and vaccine mandate era. And it has really reached a pinnacle with their obvious support and, yes, and cover up of a man that is suffering from a severe cognitive decline, one Joseph R. Biden. The consequences of their immoral and unethical decisions do not play any role whatsoever in their minds because they have become addicted to their spam. The national news media isn't the only large organization that has failed in their role as a first follower. There are several others that we could talk about for hours, days, weeks, or even months. One, though, that I really want to highlight in this week's show is the National Education Association and their state affiliate, the Tennessee Education Association. We'll get into them a bit later on. But before I do, I want to talk about another role played by members in a team or organization. That is the role of puppets. Another term for puppet is useful idiot. They are another component or type of person that is part of every organization. These puppets or useful idiots could be having their strings pulled by either the leader, or one of the followers, or even a group of the first followers. Often these puppets are the type of person that does not have a good moral compass that guides them, and often will do or say whatever they are told to, so long as they can stay with the group and not be ostracized. They do it so they can be close to the positions of power or have their seat at the lunch table with the cool kids. Now, in coaching these groups on leadership and leadership development, it was and is very important to identify those people because your message and your delivery of that message in training must be tailored differently to each of those three types of people, individually at first, then collectively as a team. It is no different in the world of politics, I'm finding out. There are the obvious people in leadership roles in the various main political groups and in the many subdivisions of those main groups. There are also the followers of that leader. And of course, there are the puppets, those useful idiots. Sometimes when you examine these groups, you will not see an obvious leader that is calling the shots, so to speak. There may or may not be a front man that is being propped up by the leader, the man or men or people behind the curtain. You will see a person chosen to appear in that position, and often that is because there has to be a fall guy in case things go really wrong for that group or organization. Our national politics right now is providing a great example of that. Because do you really think that Joe Biden is the leader of the Democrat Party right now? Do you think he is the leader of the executive branch of the government in Washington, D.C.? There is zero chance that is the case. In fact, I would wager that it was never the case. That man has never had an original thought in his life. And with the obvious onset of severe cognitive decline, there is zero chance he has any thoughts at all right now. I think the same thing can be said of the political situation, not only in Tennessee as a whole, but even right here in Sevier County. Is the front man for the Tennessee Republican Party, Mr. Scott Golden, really the leader? Or is he getting marching orders from somebody else? What about the chairman of the Sevier County Republican Party, Mr. Michael Hodges? Is he the leader of the party? Or is he getting marching orders from somebody else? Is that why he is afraid to meet with me? Are Golden and Hodges leaders, followers, or puppets? Something to think about, ladies and gentlemen. Another question to think about before we head into the first break. Of the three, leader, follower, or puppet, which individual is the most dangerous? Well, I'm up against the first break of the show, folks, so I will see you on the other side where I provide you some insight and answers to those questions. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, we're back. I hope you had a chance to think about that last question I asked. In an organization or team, or even politics, which type of person is the most dangerous? Is it the leader? Is it the follower, the first follower? Or is it the puppet? Some would say the leader because they are supposedly in charge, right? They dictate and direct the direction of the organization or government. They dictate the direction that it will travel in or govern in. The buck stops here type of person, right? Well, in rare instances, you may be right because history is replete with examples of those types of leaders, right? Especially if it is a charismatic person that is surrounded by yes men type first followers, in addition to having large numbers of puppets at their disposal. Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, Castro, Mao, and many other dictators come to mind. Those were leaders without a moral compass that rose to power and then surrounded themselves with people that would not tell the emperor that he wasn't wearing any clothes. But how about right here in our constitutional republic, or even in the state of Tennessee? Do we have leaders like that, or have we had leaders like that? I don't believe so. We've had a series of frontmen, often elected to positions of power that did not have a moral compass, but were they the true leaders of that movement or that organization? Or were they mere puppets? Was somebody or a group of people behind the curtain pulling the strings? Does anybody that watches this show or listens to this podcast have any doubt that Joe Biden is not a puppet? I would argue that the puppets are the more dangerous of the three distinct types of people in an organization because a leader that was capable of critical thinking, along with the first followers, they would be aware of the precariousness of their situations. A truly wrong move by making an illegal, immoral, unethical, or unsafe decision would have some very personal ramifications. But for the puppet, those ramifications are never considered. As I mentioned before, they will say or do anything so they can maintain their position at the cool kids table, close to the center of gravity of the people actually in charge. They often do not consider the second, third, or even fourth order effects of any decisions or actions they make or take. They are informed by the actual people in charge on what decisions to make as well as what actions to take, either explicitly or implicitly. Zero consideration is given to anything other than being told what to do. I guess an extreme example of a puppet or useful idiot would be suicide bombers. Granted, there is some religious zealotry involved in that decision-making progress, but for the most part, those people are doing what they are told to do. The same thing could be said about the shooter in the assassination attempts. These people have been whipped into a frenzy by people in leadership positions, in this case, the current administration or regime, as well as the first followers in the mainstream media. The shooter did not care what the consequences of their actions would be, including his own death. Mindless. In fact, I bet that shooter thought he would be considered a hero in many people's eyes. And he probably is. In my mind, a not so obvious, well, not so obvious to most people, but a not so obvious example of a puppet would be a cable TV news host, like Rachel Maddow, maybe. They go in front of large audiences. Well, not so large anymore because people are starting to see them for exactly what they are. But they go in front of large audiences and repeat what their handlers told them to say, often knowing it to be false. Just look at how some of the major cable, broadcast, and print news organizations covered the assassination attempt. They were live reporting that, quote, loud noises caused some confusion at President Trump's rally. Yep, like what everybody just saw with their own eyes was not an obvious assassination attempt. All of that in the previous segment leads me straight to the race for the GOP nomination right here in Tennessee's House District 12. Yep, the race that I am in right now. Is the establishment candidate that I am running against a leader, as he claims to be, a follower, as some of the voters in the district think he is, or is he a puppet, as many of the people I have encountered in my door-to-door campaigning told me he is? Keep in mind the question I asked earlier. Which of those three people are the most dangerous? The leader, the follower, or the puppet? So let me lay down some facts that back up my thinking that the establishment candidate is a mere puppet of a person, or more likely a puppet of a group of people working behind the curtain. The people that live here in Sevier County, well, we're some freedom-loving people. We don't want the government telling us we cannot have our guns. Like a vast majority of Americans, we love our constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms and would not tolerate efforts to legislate away that very same right. Groups in the volunteer state like Voices for a Safer Tennessee are big-time donors to politicians and political action committees. That organization, Voices for a Safer Tennessee, have statements on their website such as, quote, gun violence is the #1 killer of children in Tennessee, taking more lives than car accidents, which has already been debunked numerous times because they lump 18 and 19-year-olds into that statistic. And those 18 and 19-year-olds are often members of violent gangs in Democrat-run cities. They are trying to push the false narrative that these deaths of children are happening in school shootings. Another statement they use is this, quote, in an average year, 1,398 Tennesseans, children and adults alike, lose their lives to gun violence. Well, a lot of those are suicides. But never mind that fact. It is our guns they are after. Voices for a Safer Tennessee states that they are a nonpartisan, statewide coalition dedicated to prioritizing firearm safety, and here it is, advocating for pragmatic firearm laws, which is a new term associated with common sense gun laws. But they advocate for laws to make communities across Tennessee safer, blah, 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 blah. In other words, they don't want us, any of us, to have the right to keep and bear arms as guaranteed in the Constitution. A vast majority of Sevier County residents also don't want the government taking our tax dollars and then turning around and using our own money, those tax dollars, and try to bribe us with it to purchase something called education freedom from their wholly controlled institution of public education. Heck, the people in Sevier County don't even have very many options for private schools if they did want to accept the bribe money. There are only 5 private schools here in Sevier County. So if the school voucher scheme had passed, only a few people would be able to apply for the bribe money, while the residents in the rest of the county and around the state would be footing the bill for those schools. Never mind that the government strings that are always attached to government money. And that would end up turning those private schools into mirrors of the government-controlled and poorly performing public schools. And the danger posed in that legislation to homeschool parents under such education freedom schemes, it's never considered. Among the groups that lobby or donate money to political action committees to advocate for more government control over private schools and homeschoolers, as well as wanting the government to bribe the citizens with their own money, are Tennessee Federation for Children and Team Kid PAC. Those two groups in turn donate money to political action committees like the Lamberth PAC, which is controlled by Tennessee House Majority Leader William Lamberth. A vast majority of parents of school-age children here in Sevier County also do not like the woke garbage that is sneaking into those same government schools. Agendas pushed by national teacher unions like the National Education Association and its state affiliated Tennessee Education Association. Most East Tennesseans also disapprove of efforts from organizations like TN Advocates for Early Learning, the Political Action Committee arm of Tennesseans for Quality Early Education. That group is one of those organizations pushing for more mental health counselors in public school. We've seen the debacle with those types of groups over in Jefferson County, right next door. These counselors are part of the problem with pushing their woke gender identity ideology in public schools across the state. The addition of these mental health professionals with these woke agendas to an institution that should solely be focused on educating children in math, science, English, reading, and history, and other topics necessary to receive a diploma after 12 years, has only exacerbated the mental health problems in our children. They are also tools that the left uses to data mine our children, as well as data mine the children's parents. As I said, they are a contributor to the mental health crisis in school-age children in Tennessee and around the country. The exact opposite of what is being sold to the public. So far, I've listed a few organizations that are definitely not conservative and involved in the political machinations right here in the state of Tennessee. Let's go over them again for some clarification. Please write the names of these groups down. There may be some homework later, especially for the residents of Tennessee House District 12. Here we go. Voices for a Safer Tennessee, one of the common sense gun laws advocacy groups that want to limit our right to keep and bear arms. Voices for a Safer Tennessee has donated money to the Lamberth PAC, Team Kid PAC, and Tennessee Federation for Children, school voucher scheme supporters, Tennesseans for Quality Early Education, and the Tennessee Education Association, purveyors of the woke garbage in government schools. All of those that I just listed, either indirectly through PAC money, funneled through the Lamberth PAC, or directly through their endorsement, support the establishment candidate here in House District 12. Now, a leader, they would know which organizations to accept support from that also reflect East Tennessee and Sevier County values. A puppet would accept any and all support if they are told to do so by their puppet masters. Again, which type of person is more dangerous? Leader, follower, or puppet? If the puppet is elected, everybody's liberty in District 12, as well as the entire state of Tennessee, will be at risk because the puppet will do anything the so-called leaders tell them to do, either explicitly or implicitly. Now, I'm going to take a break right here and come back with the closing of the show and God's words. We'll be right back. Okay, folks, let's wrap up the show with a few thoughts, and I'll share with you some wisdom from God's word and how it applies. We've discussed what a leader is, what a follower is, and what a puppet is. Which of the three do you think is the most dangerous? I believe the puppet is, as I explained. The voters that will decide the contest for the GOP nomination here in Tennessee House District 12 have a distinct choice between a leader with bona fides that include 30 years of military service and 6+ years of corporate leadership to back him up. And then they have the puppet of the good old boy network as one of the other choices. After being called out for the financial support he received from an anti-Second Amendment group, this candidate, he posts a picture of a resolution the Sevier County Commission passed in 2019 declaring support of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. Well, whoop-de-doo, folks. A resolution is just an expressed opinion and does not have the force of law. The Sevier County Commission could have passed an ordinance declaring that federal gun laws would not be enforced in the county and that law enforcement in the county would not support any attempts by federal agencies to enforce those same federal laws within the confines of the county. You know why they didn't? Because they think that the resolution would be enough to fool the voters into believing they actually supported the Second Amendment. Always, always consider action versus inaction, if you know what I mean. A resolution isn't action. Accepting campaign money from a political action committee that receives some of its funding from an anti-Second Amendment group is action. Again, money talks, BS walks. On the other hand, I have received support from Tennessee's only no compromise gun organization. Which action indicates which of the candidates will actually support and defend the Constitution? You know the answer to that. Which candidate is endorsed by organizations that are pushing the woke garbage in public schools? You know the answer to that as well. Which candidate then is the true conservative candidate and is not a puppet to the good old boy network? Now, for this week's wisdom from God's word, and it comes to us from the book of Psalm, chapter 92, verse 6. But a weak-minded man can't understand this. Foolish people are unable to see. There are plenty of foolish people out there that are uninformed voters, people that do not take the time to properly vet every candidate. Now, some of them may be lifelong friends and will show their support by voting for the weak-minded candidate that daily demonstrates that he is merely a puppet for the good old boy establishment here in Sevier County. Thankfully, though, there are plenty more people out there this election cycle that are doing their due diligence. I'm answering numerous emails, texts, and social media messages each day asking for my view on a number of topics. After nearly every encounter, I receive the greatest word of encouragement one can get in a campaign. You've got my vote. I'm so thankful for the people that have taken the time to actually investigate the candidates this election cycle. I'm even more thankful for the citizens that are waking up to the fact that we do have a good old boy network and their puppet on one side of the equation during this primary election. I just pray that there are more of the latter two groups than there are of the foolish people group. Well, that's it for this week, folks. Before I go, though, I'd ask that you all pray for President Trump and pray that the violence against this man would come to an end. But until it does come to an end, each and every one of us have to keep our heads on a swivel, too. Violence is the favorite tool of the puppets, the weak-minded, and the foolish people. Once again, folks, here in House District 12, I'm asking you all to take a stand in the arena with me. Early voting is already underway and Election Day is not far off. Together, we can do this. We can wrest control of our government from the good old boy network, the establishment Republicans, and their cohorts, the commies. Until next week, reveille, it's time to wake up.